Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Can you guys hear me? Fantastic. My name is Daniel Neff. I'm the Head of Innovation and Entrepreneurship at the ETH AI Center. It's an immense pleasure to welcome you to today's event. As you can see, we also labeled this place Swiss AI Tower, because we have super relevant AI machine learning institutes as well in this building. Who of you has never been here? Who of you is the first time here? Oh, amazing. Okay, that's almost 70-80%. Super glad to welcome you, but of course everyone else as well that has already been here. We have a super interesting program today. Let me see if I get the right clicker. We have, okay, try again. Fantastic. We have, of course, an interesting lineup of speakers, and before we dive into that content, I would like to give you a little bit of context of the ETH AI Center, the place where you're in here at the Swiss AI Tower, but also the values and the benefits as well of what can come out of that work, which basically as well kind of culminated into such a wonderful event that we have as of today. So we will hear after me as well from Matthias Bossart and after from Peter Christian in more detail as well on the subjects. So to not spend too much time, but I think it helps to give you a little bit of context. The ETH AI Center does, of course, research. And for that, not only the ETH Zurich as institute is super important, but of course as well the immediate ecosystem that we have here in Zurich. And as you can see on the upper right, the Swiss AI Tower has some of these players as you might not recognize the logo. It's the Swiss Data Science Center or the Swiss National Institute, the Swiss National Supercomputing Center, which has the supercomputing power physically in Lugano, but also a branch over here. So we have these players here, and that brings to a lot of the initiatives that we drive within the AI Center as well crucially forward. Now, of course, as part of that research, we have, as of today, we have more than 110, I think by now it's 114 faculty members, so professors that are linked to the AI Center and basically cover the entire area that you can imagine that touches with AI. Now, of course, besides that research, we also focus, and of course, the big question is how do we bring that research into society and industry? So the second part is the reason why we have, of course, entrepreneurial activities, but also work with a lot of companies. So just to give you some idea on the left side, some of our industry partners, on the right side, our affiliated startups. We have more than 20 of these industry partners. And as of today, I think it's about 33 AI Center affiliated startups. So quite a large amount. And for us, of course, for that translation into society and industry, it's crucial to understand as well and as well drive forward these different connections between these players. And a selection of three very interesting ones, and you already see on the very right, the last one between Latticeflow and the Microbank that approached us and then we introduced, is the exciting story that you will hear as well today a little bit more. But we also had, and this is other interesting examples with RTDT Labs, one of our other startups, and also Ethan AI, we're also able to kind of create this link. With RTDT Labs, even a crazy trip, if I may say so, to India, where we had about 3 minutes of face-to-face time with the Prime Minister Modi. With Ethan AI, as well, the ability to team up and start a POC with Lincoln Sprüngli. And then, of course, that's what we hear today now with Microbank and Latticeflow. And with that, I already want to close and hand over to the next speaker, Matthias, that is, by the way, not only partner at KPMG, but is also an ETH alum with electrotechnical engineering and computer science in combination, a PhD of it. And with that, I'd like to hand over. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniel, and welcome everyone. I'm really happy to speak to all of you, and I'm always happy if I'm back at an ETH place, especially if you're a speaker, so I see the mountains from here. So, and try to be concentrated on the topic nevertheless. So when we speak about governance and compliance, I'm actually surprised so many of you are here, because it doesn't sound like the most exciting topic, but I hope what you learn from my presentation and also from what you hear from Peter and Christian afterwards is that you see how important that is to make all the nice ideas that you have around AI technology and AI systems, to make them actually successful with the customers of your companies, but with society, and actually have that deployment. So hopefully that's what you get. Now I tried to get this one figured out, but who of you is more from a startup, let's say, or research kind of environment? Can you raise hands? Okay. And who of you is more like in a corporate setting? Okay, I think not everybody raised their hands, but I think it's maybe 50-50, and I try to cover grounds so that it's hopefully important for you on the corporate side, showing you some tools and some structures that we also use at KPMG to deal with AI and AI risks. But also for the startups, I believe it will be very relevant because at some point you want to sell your solutions to some customers, maybe to some big company, and hopefully you get an understanding of how the bigger companies, your prospective clients, think about those risks. But even if that's not the case, if you grow yourself and become the next, let's say, Google, it's relevant for you to cover those grounds, because I'm completely convinced that in order to be successful with AI, you need to gain the trust of your different stakeholders. Why is that? Let me start with some risks. Some of you who are in the research space may recognize that animal or that picture actually. For those who are not in that space, what is this? Very difficult question. Anybody? Okay, I think it's too stupid of a question. It's a cat, I guess. What is this? Also a cat, according to us all. Anybody against it? Okay. You're against it? AI cat. Okay. It is a picture of a cat, but it has been slightly manipulated, not visible to our eyes, with some almost, the manipulation is almost, looks like noise if you look at it in detail. And the AI system that went through it was 88% sure that this is actually a cat, like we were. And then after that perturbation, which is this picture, it was 99% sure that it was guacamole. Now that is a pretty old research paper, and things have moved on since then, but it's still very difficult to actually be robust against some adversarial perturbation. One, AI risk, which doesn't give a lot of confidence, at least to me, if somebody takes decision based on AI that matter to my life. Another element, risk bias. So here in Midjourney, somebody put the prompt, the face of an Afghan girl. So you see a number of pictures that were generated. Probably some of you recognize it. National Geographic, that iconic poster, actually influenced the system so much that now Afghan girls have green and blue eyes, although in the Afghan population, 5% or so actually have green and blue eyes. So again, here an example of bias, another risk that we have with AI system. Go on, memorization. That is the original picture from a movie. And if you ask the system, it basically generates that data, that picture again, with some perturbation in it. and basically memorizes what you have used as input data. So an interesting risk also to leak data or for all the copyright violation and all that, those topics that we discuss. Hallucination, name me for each EU country, monument artist, historical figure, work of art. Diego Velázquez is not a typical German name, and you're right. Diego Velázquez is a Spanish artist. We have all seen that when we use generative AI, that you get hallucinations. And then some of those issues that may arise and have risk or safety implications are in the systems, are addressed. So if I'm asking the system what text is on that image, basically it recognizes that it's a CAPTCHA, which is actually supposed to find out whether you're a human being or a machine, and it refuses to answer. If you do the same thing like that, with a slightly different prompt, it actually extracts the text here. So that's kind of an example of prompt hacking. So you see, although we have AI systems around and different sorts of AI systems use them on a daily basis, they are not extremely mature, and some of the basics are actually major challenges. And it's important that a lot of research goes into that and the improvements take place. But what's also the case here, because with the recent hype triggered by generative AI, everybody wants to use AI in all systems, and even in organizations. And even those organizations who have used AI in different parts of the organization want to use it even more, and it's kind of rolled out to everybody, also to non-expert users who have way more difficulties to actually be critical about the output of the system. And what this here shows is, okay, a lot of people, the CEOs here in our survey, have AI as a top investment, so a lot of money goes into AI. We can all see that, we can also feel that, we read that in the press. But at the same time, if you ask the public, people all around the world, a lot of them are actually not really trusting those systems. They are worried that some of the issues that I've shown before actually affects them badly. Think of a system that assesses CVs for jobs, that assesses your credit score, and that has quite an impact on your life, or even on safety if it's related to health, medical system, or let's say autonomous cars and so on. So how do we instill that trust, or what do we need to have that trust, to get that trust, or what is it actually? So here's a definition of digital trust, which I like quite a bit. It has appeared in a paper of the World Economic Forum where we have been a co-author of it. And the definition that we used is this one here. Digital trust is the expectation of individuals, so all of us, that the technologies and services that we get from organizations, and the organizations themselves, will actually protect our interests and not do harm to us, and also do that in line with societal expectation and values. Now that's quite broad, and the societal expectation in Switzerland are quite different from societal expectations and values in some other parts of the world. So that is actually a tricky thing to achieve. Making it a bit simpler, and in the areas where I feel at home, digital trust for me, and that's the only equation here, and I'm sure some of you will not agree that this is an equation, but anyway, digital trust for me is about having a secure and safe technologies. So making AI in a way that it's robust, that it's not that it cannot turn against our health, against our safety in general, and having it also resilient, so that it also works if there are some adversaries fighting against it or kind of attacking it. Think of cyber attacks, which also work on AI systems. And then the second ingredient, important, is the responsible use. And you see, when we talk here maybe more about technology, because we are at ETH finally, responsible use and the ethics around it is as important to generate that digital trust, and with that digital trust to get the acceptance by the public, by our customers, to use our services that we actually deploy or that we provide based on AI. Now, whenever such things are there, companies like ours, we like to think in terms of a framework. And that's now quite an overwhelming thing here. I'll explain it a little bit, because that's what we also use internally. KPMG, we have around 250,000 people globally. We are in 150 countries, and we have hundreds of AI applications that we use either internally for ourselves or for our clients. So it is actually a nightmare to manage that, and so you need to put some structure around it. And that is the way of how we put structure around it. That's now a test for your eyesight, and don't be worried if you are not able to read it. But here in the center we have, in order to get trusted AI, we have kind of three overarching goals or principles. One is values-led, so that it's in line with that values of society, but also of our company. And we just said, so that it doesn't trick people that it doesn't trick people that it doesn't affect the safety of people, etc. Human-centric, which means it's supposed to help us, to help humans, to help our customers, and work with us, as opposed to replace us. And then trustworthy, I talked a lot about that trustworthy piece. And in order to get there are a number of domains that you need to deal with, going from fairness of the algorithms to data integrity of the underlying data to security, safety, privacy. You need to keep that from strategy through the entire life cycle, through the data, how you collect and maintain the data, through the models, the evaluation of those models, and then through the deployment. Now, a lot of things said here, but you'll recognize some of that later on, and again, it is very helpful if you are part of a corporate organization to basically structure the topic. If you are on the startup side, to understand what kind of questions you will get from your clients if they happen to be larger companies. Now, whenever you have these type of risks and people get excited, the regulators pop up. We talked a lot about the EU AI Act, and it's an important one. But if you look at what's happening around the world, everywhere, you have at least some strategy type of regulatory guidelines, or you even have laws that come up across the world. That is not something I checked for comprehensiveness, but it should show it is not just the EU AI Act. Now that's the bad news. That's the bad news. what happens in Switzerland. The Swiss Federal Council said, let's look what the others do, especially what the EU does. We do some study, and by the end of 24, we should have an analysis ready to understand what do we need to regulate in Switzerland so that we are compliant with EU AI Act, and where do we actually need regulation, where do we not need regulation. And I think an important point here is always in the regulation, do we regulate technology or do we regulate rather use cases and applications? I think many of us agree it should be on the applications and on the use cases, because technology, you can always use that for good or for bad, and therefore that second, the use cases are the key topic. Here, if you take some of those regulations and principles, the good thing here is you have a number of principles that come out of it: fairness, explainability, integrity, security, resiliency, accountability, privacy, risk approach, that are actually in a number of those regulations. So the good news here is, whatever comes up, those regulations are to a certain degree at least aligned, and it makes sense in a company or also in start to deal with those vertical topics, as opposed to trying to go regulation by regulation and sort that out. Maybe at some point you need to go into those very details, but quite often, and the lawyers in the room will probably not agree with that, but quite often an 80-20 approach is actually way more effective and of course way more efficient to implement. I want to go a little bit into the EU AI Act also, not just to look at how cumbersome that is. It may not be that cumbersome for many of you, but also to show that not everything is regulated under that act. And so what the EU did is basically they created 4 categories of AI systems according to risk. Some of the things are unacceptable risk, so it's prohibited. Those are things, behavioral manipulation, exploitation of vulnerable characteristics of people, social scoring by public authorities. So if you get if the Swiss Confederation would tell you, oh, Dani is actually a grade 6 citizen of Switzerland, that's prohibited in the EU. Then you have the high-risk AI systems, which have an impact on health, safety, or on fundamental rights of people. So they fall under this category. That could be, for example, eligibility to credit, health or life insurance, if you do that with AI systems or supported by AI systems, job applications that I mentioned before, and safety-related products. If you have that, you have quite a number of requirements that you have to follow, from impact assessment, risk assessment, making sure you have everything well documented, you have all the robustness checks in detail, and you also have the human in the loop. So that is also similarly regulated are foundation models. So if you create the next OpenAI, you would fall under a similar category. And then a lot of the things are actually with limited risk. So those are systems where you basically only have to be transparent about the use. You have to tell the user, hey, that output is generated by an AI system. So your chatbot needs to be clear that it's kind of an AI chatbot, not another person behind it. And then you have the minimal risk, where you essentially have no regulations, no limitations from the law. I said there are so you have all those laws, but you also have frameworks and standards that come out from different bodies. ISO, International Standards Organization, is one of it that is important. NIST is basically the US equivalent of it. Those standards can be your friends, because a lot of people who have dealt with AI many years basically help write those standards. And even if you don't want to be fully compliant with those standards, it can help you to actually address the different topics. How much? I have to finish. Okay. So when we navigate those standards, also here can be overwhelming. ISO alone has something like 25 AI-related standards and guidelines, but you can navigate them pretty easily. You have a standard called 42001, which is around the governance. So basically that tells you what should you have in place in an organization to manage the risks related to AI, and how do you deal with the data that may, in this scheme here, you have kind of a real data pool, but maybe in many cases that is related to the AI system only. Anyway, those things are that's your starting point, 42001, to get that the breadth that you need to look at. Now, if you have your individual AI systems, your model, and we're going to hear about one specific example in detail with Peter and Christian afterwards. If you go here, you have some other topics that apply and that are relevant for and specific for each of those systems that you use. And that can be, and Peter and Christian will talk about that, about topics like here, robustness, also kind of regulated or guided by certain standards. So start here and then go into the depth and use that as your help and as your friend to navigate the breadth and the depth of your AI governance. Now, another busy slide, but I'm going quickly. That's what 4201 does. Basically takes into account the people and the processes and the technical aspects and how you manage that in an organization. And then you have a number of control objectives, actually 9 domains to address. And you see here, the system life cycle comes back again. Resources for AI systems is things that you need to have an overview of what you actually have in the organization. Sounds trivial to have an inventory of your AI systems. In a company like ours, it's nothing but trivial. It's actually very complicated, and in many companies they struggle with that already. And then I'm not going through them individually, but also what is important also when you hear afterwards the case of Peter and Christian, third party, you want to make sure that if you, as an organization, you buy or you use AI systems that somebody else provides or develops for you, that this is safe, because if you operate it with your customers, you are accountable that you handle it right. That's kind of the compliance aspect. But also, if you think back on the trust, you don't want to disappoint the trust of your clients and of your customers. So make sure if you use things, it's actually from outside, it's actually as safe as the things that you develop yourself. Now, in the interest of time, I'm jumping the KPMG example, and as a summary for the organization, if you want to govern, or if you need to govern your AI, set up your governance around AI systems. Things to start is always with kind of writing down high-level rules. What are the principles that you are going to follow? Very important to have everybody aligned. That's easy when you are 10 people in a company. It's getting more difficult if you are 1,000 or 100,000. Then engage with those people internally, but also with your clients. You want to be transparent about the use of AI, because transparency is a very important element of trust. We all know that from everyday life, not just AI related. You have to look at what are the things that I really need to have under control, and control means here steer, that I have put things in place, that I have an outcome that I wish for. So if I develop AI system, I may have controls in place that I develop them in a robust manner. And you have to train people around you, because as I said in the beginning, now AI is available to everyone in one or the other form. And then the second part is manage those risks. That means you need to understand what they are, identify them. You need to have an inventory of those systems so that you know where in your organizations such systems are built. You also want to check that you are in line with regulations or with good practices, and decide on, okay, which gaps do you prioritize? Then test them thoroughly, and we'll hear a lot about that from Peter and Christian. And testing AI system is not a data scientist or a software engineer testing them, but it actually needs different multidisciplinary know-how. You need to have people that understand the regulatory side of things, people that understand the software side of things, people that understand the data side or the model side of things. And don't forget the third parties. So that's it from me. Now I hand over to Peter and Christian to go much deeper, and I think there is way more details now on how to manage that in a specific use case. Good.
All right, so hi everyone. Really happy to be here, like Matthias. I'm also very happy to be back at ETH and visit. So Matthias did a great, very broad overview of AI trust, and it's a very broad space. I mean, I saw on one of your slides, you had the 25 ISO standards talking about data quality, model robustness, governance, biases, and so on. So my goal with Christian today is to really go a little bit deeper, more concretely, because ultimately it always boils down to what's a high value AI use case that business can benefit from, and how do we make sure it works, so that things don't go wrong once we go in production. So we'll talk about the concrete AI assessments that we did for some of the key critical AI models used by Migros Bank. And my name is Petr Tsankov. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Ladislaw AI, and I'm here with Christian. Christian, do you want to briefly introduce yourself as well?
My name is...
I think it's not working.
My name is Christian, and I am an independent consulting, and I was mandated by Migros Bank. I worked over 30 years in the financial industry.
All right. Thanks, Christian. So I would also want to start with a bit of background. So why are we here? And I mean, in terms of time, why now? This is a big topic. But also we're at the ETH AI Center. So does anybody, so that you did not show it, but does anybody remember what is the mission of the AI Center? Half of you have been here before. So, well, I'll tell you. So, the AI Center was created to promote research innovation for making AI trustworthy, inclusive, and accessible. And here's why this is such a big topic today and why the AI Center, I believe, also exists. So, in the last decade, we have seen really tremendous progress in terms of building highly accurate models. So, this is progress in research, best top 5 accuracy on ImageNet. So, superhuman performance. And because we have this technology now, while it's very cool and nice to build accurate models on ImageNet and recognize cats or guacamole, what's really interesting also now is shifting to industry, right? So it's creating massive industries, big markets for building real AI solutions to solve real world problems in medical, financial services, literally all the verticals we have today. These are pretty big markets. So these are the sizes by different AI approaches. So supervised ML is still, or predictive AI is still the biggest chunk, because this is the AI that works autonomously. You deploy, make decisions, and it works. Generative AI also, started recently, but rapidly going to grow over the next few years. And I'll keep going to Matthias' slide. So you did mention 72% of the CEOs don't believe are afraid or don't believe in the technology, right? 61 are worried. All right, my bad. So I'm surprised that's actually, I think more people should be concerned, because if you look at last year's numbers, 85% of the models that have been built actually never reach production. So look at this, how much investment is made in this technology, see how much money of this goes to garbage because ultimately things don't work out. Why they don't work out? Well, I mean, sometimes, they mistake cats for guacamole. And but other times it does affect people. Like last year, we saw the first lawsuit for a recruiting system that's biasing when it makes decisions. We've seen people dying. COVID. So there were hundreds of models being built. None of those there was zero effect of these models in reality. Why? Because it's very different to build models that give you very nice accuracy on kind of these test data sets. It's very different to build really highly accurate, reliable models that work reliably at scale once you put them in production. That's a very big challenge. And we see the same kind of problems also in generative AI. Again, bias, mistakes that are affecting a lot of things. And we're at the stage where this year, not surprisingly, AI trust is the #1 technology trend by Gartner, because we have got to make progress and solve this problem somehow. So what we're going to jump into now is, again, a very concrete use case that actually does deliver high value for Migros Bank. And then we'll show you how we can actually ensure trust about this model. So Christian, I'll give you the floor to tell us what Migros Bank is doing. There you go.
So Migros Bank decided about 3 years ago to have a participation with Govago. Govago is in the mobility space, it's a startup, and they're doing a really good job. And the bank believed that it is worth really to enter a new market, mobility market, expanding there by working together closely with a startup. In this case, it was Govago. And one of the things Govago is doing is they are in the leasing space, so they are financing cars for consumers and also for corporates. And the special thing on one hand is really that they have it all fully digital end-to-end, so you can really lease your car, you can sign your contract, you can do everything you need to do to get the lease online. You never have to go to a dealer, you never have to go to a bank or whatever you want, so you can do it fully online. And we are into that, and when we talk about the leasing business, of course, then we talk about cars. And the one important point in a leasing contract is what is the value of this car 4 years or 5 years from now. So we don't know, but we have to have a good assumption about the value of the car, because it directly affects the leasing rate of your client. So why is it important? So when you set the value at the end of the lease too high, then people will love it, because then they have a low leasing rate. It's going to be very cheap for them. And the problem is for the leasing company, when the car comes back, then the market value of that car is most probably lower than the residual value that is set in the leasing contract. And then you are going to lose a lot of money. And on the other hand, when you set residual values too low, you're not going to be competitive because you want a leasing rate that is competitive. And when it's too low, then you're going to end up in a problem because the residual value is much more important than the interest rate. So we worked together with Govago, and they decided we want to go new ways in deciding and defining this residual value. And they developed a tool, an AI tool that is predicting the residual value. And I think the important point about here is really that this is now not a game, because we're going to have a lot of cars. We're going to finance thousands of cars in leasing. And when the values are wrong, it's going to end up in a big loss for everybody. And we don't want to go there. And if it's too low, we're not going to make any business. So that's a little bit the idea. So they developed a tool, an AI tool to define the residual value for each car today in 4 or 5 years. That's very difficult, and you have maybe also read in the newspapers that residual values go up and down. It's very difficult to predict because markets are changing. There are new models coming in, electric vehicles are coming in. Combustion engine is maybe going out of the market, we don't know, so we need to have a good prediction, and with AI we can do that. And they developed it, and that was the moment we said as a bank, yes, we want to go that path, that's important, but we also want to have it checked, because just believing in the model like that, I can tell a little bit more about it's not enough. So let's talk to our friends. Let's talk to Petar, who is going to help us, Lattice-Flow, to look at the model and tell us whether the model makes sense or not.
I have the mic. So let me take a minute to introduce Lattice-Flow, because I think everybody knows KPMG. Almost everybody knows Migros Bank, at least in Switzerland, but maybe not everybody yet knows Lattice-Flow AI. So we are a spin-off from ETH Zurich, founded with the mission to make AI safe and trustworthy. And my co-founders and myself, we have been working in this broad space of AI reliability and safety for more than 10 years now. We are known for having built the first scalable frameworks for safety verification of deep neural networks, which is the core foundation of practically most modern AI. And based on this, we've been winning quite a few competitions in the past, like the first AI safety competition and so on. So it's beyond, today beyond the founders. So when Christian said he came to me, we're not just the 4 people, so we're 35 people, 15 million in funding, offices in Switzerland, in the US, in Bulgaria, and so on. And so how do we help AI teams build more performance safe and trustworthy models? So let's take a look at, what are AI teams doing today to build AI models? And that's roughly what you would see. So it's, companies do have the infrastructure to actually build models. They have storage, you have compute, there's all the software for labeling data, training the models are readily available, tracking the experiment. So this all exists, right? But the biggest challenge is how do you actually establish and maintain accuracy and reliability of these models? And the reality is that this infrastructure is just not enough, right? So you cannot just train a model on any data. It has to be on the right kind of data, representative data. It has to be that doesn't have to have biases. You don't want to have labeling errors. Otherwise, you just cannot train a good model. And then once you move on the model side, so once you have a model that gives you some performance, in research, it's enough to just have an aggregate metric because you can publish papers with this. In practice, if you're using this for the car leasing business and you have a model that is, let's say, systematically undervaluing Lamborghinis, then everybody would go and buy a bunch of Lamborghinis, and then somebody would lose a lot of money, right? So you have to figure out how do you find these systematic errors that the models are making, why are they there, and do something about it from a business point of view. So that's exactly what we do at Lattice-Flow. So we're building the trust layer for this AI stack that enables you to find data and model issues based on the platform that we're building. And so this is the yellow and the blue part. This is something you do in development, so finding data model errors. And then what's interesting is once you go in production, so it's not just about developing the model, you also have companies, users actually using these models. Like in this case, Migros is using the models trained by Govago. So it's also, as mentioned, very important to establish trust, and this is what an AI assessment would provide. So there's well-defined, as Matthias showed, 25 standards for AI. So we can use those standards to actually show the absence of or incorrectness of data and models. So that's what we will focus on and chat about more specifically today. And a bit more broadly, so who actually needs these AI assessments? So to give a context around this, well, there's different roles, as mentioned. So it's not just about building the models, which would be the model providers. It's also about who is using these models. Like in this case, actually, Migros Bank came to us as a user of critical models because they wanted to ultimately mitigate risk, because you don't want to lose money. You want to also establish trust between the provider, which also, as Matthias mentioned, if you're a startup building solutions, you also want your clients and users to trust your solution. So this established trust is very also important benefit that does derive from these assessments. And because the regulatory frameworks are also advancing fast, so there will be soon, regulatory compliance requirements that would actually require you necessitate to do these assessments. And not to underestimate, also model improvement is also a big benefit. So these assessments are, as we'll see in a second, technical assessment. They tell you what's wrong with the model or the data and what can you do in a practical way to actually get a better system. That's also a very nice benefit from a model improvement point of view. So in terms of the assessment, so Christian, maybe a few words on what did you try to achieve with by putting us here in the middle?
Yes. So maybe the first step was really in choosing lattice flow and why would we choose lattice flow. And when I said Petal before, it was not by mistake, because one of the important things was we wanted to look for the best in their field, and they were elected like in 2022, if I'm not wrong, best AI company. And there is a hype in AI, so a lot of people talk about AI. But we had a very close look at their CVs, especially at Petal's and Pavel's CV, because we wanted to know did they really work with it and not just talk about it. So that was a first very key important point why we would pick them. And the second point why we picked them, we wanted them to be fully independent from the people at Govago that developed the model. That's also important because the good people in that space, they all know a little bit each other, more or less. And you must be sure that not one is too strongly interconnected with the other. So that is maybe the second thing. And the third thing why lattice flow would be the right choice for us as a bank was it's their core business. So making an assessment is a core business of them. It's not they do that apart and they do their own generative AI model, blah, blah, something, and then they do some assessments because it's also fun. It's really what they do every day. So that were the three key points for us why we would go with them. And of course, when we met them in the first call and talked together about leasing, the impression was also that they are willing to learn a little bit about the business and not only talk about the wonderful technology and formulas and slides and stuff. Okay, so that is the important point. And the second thing why we would do it now from a bank's perspective is we want to reduce the model risk. That was a very important thing. As I said, it's not just for fun, it's really business behind. And the numbers add up very quickly to millions of Swiss francs. And when you're wrong, it's going to be really expensive. So we want to be sure that the model we have in use is really robust. That's very important. It produces numbers that make sense and that we can rely on. Because when you have a low number of leasing contracts, you can maybe check each leasing contract. Does it make sense? When you then have higher numbers and you really want to scale and grow, then you cannot check each and every residual value. Did it work or not? So we must really reduce this risk of the model. That is the first important point. And the second important point, as the bank is regulated and FINMA is always looking if everything is going fine, and it's a credit risk, of course, we want also to show or be able to show that it's not that we just trust these people from Govago, which are very trustworthy and they are very capable, no question, and Peter really met them. I think they know what they talk about. But when someone comes to us and asks us, why did you pick that model? Does it work? We say, yes, it does work. Why do you think it works? Yeah, you know, the people at Govago are really great. Okay, maybe that's the wrong answer. So you need really to show from an independent side someone that looked at the model, that you can trust, that he knows what he talks about, and then really have this assessment done. So that's the second important point for us. And I think the third was also mentioned before. I think there were a lot of people in executive boards. They heard a lot about AI and it's fun as long as it's just a bit gimmicks. But when it's really about real business, they start to get much more interested and they want really to know what are we doing here. And they want to do it in detail and not just a little bit. So I think also this assessment was very helpful in bridging a gap in building up trust. So we trust in Govago, we trust in our business model, but we also trust now in this AI model, and we trust in it because we also have it checked by people. We are really sure they know what they talk about. So this is really the impact on the bank, that we can now say we have a model we use every day, and I think with the model we can offer great leasing rates to our clients. At the same time, we are sure that we can control risk. And I think we are also fully compliant. And I think as another point is that also the executive board of the bank is fully supportive of the idea and using the model. I think this is for us why we did it, what it really helped us, why we would go for lattice flow. And I think we will continue the partnership also because they have done a really good job. And this point that Peter, you mentioned, it's also the development of the model. That's important. So they're also going to make it better, Govago. We also got some recommendation already to make it better. They implemented everything. And then we will continue on this path, and then we come back maybe then to lattice flow and have checked again what has been done, does it make sense. So this is a little bit from the bank's perspective, why we would do this assessment and what it helped. And I think what is maybe a last point, or maybe it's coming later again, is this connection between business and AI. I think I know a lot about leasing, I know a lot about banking and credits, and he knows a lot about AI, and you must bring that really together. Because if you want to check if the model makes sense, you have to understand the outcome, the numbers, but you also have to understand the input. And if you don't understand the leasing business, you cannot really make an assessment. So also from a technical side, you need people that are willing to learn a little bit the business side. And I learned a lot about statistics and other stuff, and AI stuff, so I asked my stupid questions to better understand why they would come up with some of the results. But there must be really this exchange between what we needed on the business side, and we need to understand the outcome on the business side, and understand what they are testing and why they are testing it like they are testing it. So it needs from both sides a step towards each other, otherwise it would not work.
Yeah, definitely this connection between the business and technical is very, very key. So, and now that we know why this was done, so let me wrap up with what we actually did here. And so I'll go back to Matthias's slide. So how do you actually get started? So one of the challenges was this is indeed one of the very first assessments done on AI models following these standards. Challenge is it's a very, very broad space, lots of standards, governance,
about governance, about models, about data, different data properties. And what we the goal, I think, also of Migos was, how do we go in production as fast as possible? And to do this, ultimately, it boils down to there is a model, makes predictions about the values of these cars. It is either good or not good, so we have to make sure these predictions are accurate and reliable. So what we focused on is we skipped, all the rest and focused on data quality, model robustness to make sure that this product is of high quality, and we can, or Migos can start using it as soon as possible. And this is what the AI assessment actually looked like. As Christian mentioned, it is certainly a lot of collaboration between business and technical. So this is not just about defining some random metrics and claiming that this works or doesn't work. The ultimate goal is that we want to have something that's comprehensible to business people, business stakeholders, and can make decisions like, should we use this model? Can we trust it or not? If there's some gaps in performance, what do we do to mitigate those risks?
Maybe
Now,
I can say something here.
Sure.
When the first version was a little bit difficult to read. Because it was very much focused, of course, on a technical speech. But it's important, and I think we really got there. You have to translate that in business language for your business that you use it for. I think
Exactly.
that is really then the business impact is that you have an assessment, behind all the mathematics and systematics are right, and you translate it in a language that can be understood by, in our case, by a banker or by the chief risk officer. When he reads it, the executive summary, he has a feeling, okay, it makes sense. There is this link, this connects, and there is only like a scientific paper introduction that may be great when you're a student, but it doesn't really would not help in this context.
Exactly. So that was certainly a challenge, and it's also the starting point actually, because again, this is kind of the high level flow. So it always starts with what are the actual business requirements. So in this case, it's car leasing. These models can make errors. What does this mean for the bank? And then from there, you can derive the main requirements that you want to be checking. And then starting from these requirements, then given the existing standards, we can start instantiating them into and formalizing concrete, technical measures, which are concrete things you can measure on the data in the model to get some objective evidence about data and model quality. What's interesting is these here are executable checks. So once you define them, you can rerun them for future versions of the models and so on. And in our case, for this particular project, the assessment consisted of model robustness and data quality, which are two separate standards that you follow to do these evaluations. And then each of those consists of multiple measures, which are things you evaluate and measure on the artifacts. Then once you can formalize this, you can start measuring kind of the results on the data in the model. These are technical results, which was, I guess, where our first report version was ending here. So they talk about how many features are missing values. Maybe the models are have very high error rate for certain types of samples. And then critical next step is, given these technical results, as Christian mentioned, is how do we translate this back to business and understand how to mitigate these risks in a meaningful way. So I want to do you have a point, Christian?
Just a remark, in this whole process that we met about every 2 weeks, I think. It was every 2 weeks. We talked together, because what we wanted to prevent is they start and then 3 months later they come with a wonderful report and we don't know what they were talking about. So every 2 weeks we really had like check-ins. We ask questions, they ask questions. So they learned a lot about leasing, we learned a lot about what they are checking. And like that we got really a very good alignment that we got at the end of the day a report that really helped us.
Makes sense, yeah. So, and I want to leave you with 4 key takeaways regarding the AI assessment itself. One key takeaway, so you have to go deep, so we don't just stay at a high level, talk about policies and processes on how these things are developed. We do go deep, we do integrate the data in the model and really evaluate errors and artifacts about these technical artifacts. Second key point, again, there's a very big gap between business requirements and technical measures, so that does require a lot of collaboration. I think we spoke more frequently, maybe it was 2 weeks. So how do you bridge this gap? Because if you open, it's not even possible to translate the standards into measures without domain experts. If you just open these standards, these are the kind of measures they're talking about. So, for example, the records have to be relevant. So what does relevance even mean, for a given database for car leasing? We have no idea. So this is where, we would go to Christian, and Christian, what would you consider relevant in this in this data?
There are different records, but it should be about cars, for example, not trucks. And then also within cars, there are cars for like business use, and there are cars for private normal use. And these are all records. We have to understand where do we use what. And that's why we talked a lot, that they understand what is really relevant for us and what is not. That is because they maybe find a gap somewhere, and then they feel like, oop, there is a gap, and maybe it's not so important, but somewhere else where they thought maybe it's not that important, from a business perspective, it is very important.
So, these are really the examples where you do need domain experts to concretize them. There are examples where things are just ambiguous, meaning that, like, if you think of data representativeness, there's different ways to do this. Which one does it make sense for this particular car leasing use case? Some are well defined, like feature completeness, how many features are missing values. But even this is a bit shallow, so it doesn't answer all the questions. Well, there's features, some are important, others are not important. There's more questions you need to ask. And third key takeaway is that these are technically challenging problems. This is not, again, reviewing some policies and processes on a high level. This is using quite a rich set of ML techniques to solve this and compute these measures we're talking about. Representativeness, anomaly analysis, model blind spots, which is also, again, these are whole research areas that talk about how do you go about solving these particular problems. Fourth key takeaway, we already highlighted quite a lot about this, like how do you translate these technical measures back to business? So what does this even mean? How do we mitigate if the models are making mistakes? Do we need more reserves, maybe insurance? I don't know, Christian, you're the expert on this side on how to handle this.
No, that's exactly, maybe they say this is 99.7% correct. And then we would say, okay, why is it 100? Is it important that's 100? Is this 0.3 relevant or is it not relevant? I also made them think a little bit about the numbers and what they really mean. And then you can make this transfer. And these are fake examples. But when we have like 13% of the features missing, that's more than on a business side to think, is that a problem? When we have a large data set where a lot of important features is not there, we don't know enough about the car. And then we have to say, if it's true that we have with 13% we don't have the features, what does that mean for the model? Then they have to give us an answer, and not only a mathematical answer in terms of percentage or deviation or whatever it is. They also have to say what does it mean also in real life? What can be the impact on the values that come out at the end? That is really this lifting to measure it, to bring it into the report and to make it understandable, and only then you really create the value for the business.
Yep. So I think we can wrap it up here. So I hope you got a better understanding of what these AI assessments look like. This is summary of benefits, it's risk mitigation, compliance, governance in terms of the models. And we took a bit longer, so I think we ate the Q&A session. But I think nevertheless we can take a few questions. Matthias, please come here as well. Maybe you can also answer some of them, and then we can shift most questions during the beer and wine and coffee parts. All right, thanks. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much for the presentation. The use case that you described is for machine learning models.
Mm-hmm.
How would you do this for Gen AI models? Because generation is a completely different ballgame.
Yeah, well, the properties would be different. The standards that you would apply would be different. So details, would be, the difference would be, of course, in the details for sure. So, but there are standards that do talk about these checks. Even if you look at the EU AI Act, some of the properties that are mentioned there are relevant things that you can codify and also measure. So
In your experience, have you seen this already done for GenAI?
this doesn't exist yet. So there's very high level, kind of whiteboard level evaluations. Like, is this like, did they mention anything of where the data is coming from? Check mark or a cross. So this technical assessment of this kind has not been done yet. But let's say there will be progress soon on this.
You mentioned FINMA. So how did you onboard the regulator?
I'll leave this to Christian.
We did not onboard the regulator on purpose, but of course FINMA is there all the time, and we wanted to, because it's a new business line, what we did here for Migobank. So we wanted, if they would come and ask questions, we want to be ready. So that was also, so it's like two sides. The more important side is that we want to control and understand risk and also manage risk. That is the key point. But we also want to be ready if also internal or external auditors come. They also have questions, and also FINMA could come anytime and have questions. And then we wanted to be ready. To also show, I think it's important for the bank that we're not just using a tool and we don't think about it. We really want to use it responsibly. We want to understand what we are using, and we want to have this third party looking at it. That is. But we did not go first to FINMA to ask whether we can do it. But that's also not the idea. But the idea is if they would come and ask questions, I think we are in a very good position to answer.
Maybe I add to that. Probably you're from the industry. Are you from the financial service industry?
No, but I'm from a regulator.
Okay, so maybe then I say for the audit. So the likelihood that FINMA at some point will look at it is quite high. Actually, in the risk monitor, they mentioned that in the most recent risk monitor, they mentioned that as an area trend to watch, and basically said that they will observe the regulated entities with regards to use of AI. And unless you're from FINMA and want to add to that.
No
But that's kind of the FINMA thing.
And also beyond FINMA in financial requirements, so compliance requirements are definitely coming because all these regulations are very close. So right now it's mostly internal risk control, risk mitigation driven, but compliance is next.
How do you adjust to a new industry vertical? It seems there's a lot of work to adjust to the business logic.
There's no way. Can you repeat?
A new industry vertical.
Oh yeah.
How would you do that? Because you're a startup, you're not a consultant, right? How do you do that?
No. Well, I mean that's why it was a collaboration, as Christian mentioned. It's not like we just was handed some raw technical artifacts and then we just give a bunch of results. So we did learn a lot about how to do this bridging. So on the technical side, there's quite a few things that are very generic. They still need translation to the business logic. And longer term, this would always remain. So you would not be able to have a meaningful, fully automated technical check that just is automatically translated to business. That's not something that we expect, and that's where consulting would be necessary to bridge this gap.
Linking to that, how do you translate the regulatory standards and requirements into something that you can then machine execute in order to test? I would expect that to also take human input.
For sure, yes. If you look at, so there's two aspects. So there's the regulation that are like the legal frameworks that put requirements, and then there are standards that list concrete risks and mitigation. So these, once you go to the standards, these are more concrete, like feature completeness. This is almost like well mathematically defined. So that's where the translation happens. But it is, again, you start from the standards. They have they define different models on how do you, kind of a framework on how do you go about doing this formalized step from business requirements to measures. So this exists. There's quite a few standards that talk about this.
And so when I mentioned all those standards, some of them, like the ones that are broad, like the one here, it says more than what needs to be checked, and what kind of needs to be in place in terms of processes. whereas some of those standards that relate to the green part that we showed, that go into robustness and so on, they go way more into the how, and those are the elements that are more easily implemented in automated checks.
Exactly. More questions? One in the back.
I have great sympathy for industry because I can imagine industry is thinking, oh my God, after privacy by design, this is going to be a complete nightmare.
Yeah.
So my question is, do you see an opportunity for an amalgamation of the AI assessment compliance process with the privacy by design process?
Whether there is possibility to automate the assessments?
To amalgamate, actually, but if there's an opportunity to automate too, I mean, it's got to be optimized somehow. Otherwise,
For sure, yes,
business will collapse.
Yeah, so for certain compliance checks, again, there would always be part of it is generic and would be fully automatable. The drag and drop, like just puts the artifacts and get results. But for these specific business cases, there would also be a layer of domain specificity where you would work with people.
Maybe I can add here on that on the privacy. So a lot of the things that the companies have implemented to manage privacy, some of the processes, some of the governance around it, is actually, it's not a one-to-one. It needs to be bespoke, but there are lots of similarities, and very much recommend that you piggyback on what you already have. We talk about that management system. You have that in place in companies for privacy, hopefully, possibly, or for security. And some of it is really, you basically bring the similar kind of approaches to the next topic. So in privacy, for example, for those who are not so familiar with it, you need to have an overview of the kind of the data, the type of private, personal identifiable data that you have in the company. The similar thing here is actually you need to have an overview of the AI systems. In order to get there, you need to have some processes in place, and some of that can be leveraged. Similar to developing systems, technical systems, if you have the privacy by design that you mentioned as a design principle, well, here you somehow you have to get towards trusted or responsible AI by design as a kind of a vision for a company. And there are similarities for those who deal with those management systems that should absolutely be leveraged.
Yes, but it always starts with a model that helps the business.
Yeah, and we definitely also see the trend, like the similarity that a lot of these things would be done by design early on, where so you would not just view the models and then before you go to Migros, then think about is the the data quality handled well, is the model performing well. These are things that you implement much earlier on. So like this, you know that you would kind of get the right artifacts, so you could validate it once you need to go to deployment. All right, so maybe it's time for drinks and food. Daniel, what do you think?
Let's start. Thanks a lot.
All right, thanks everyone.